want the cable?
No, I don't. You can just leave it next to you right now. All right, people, let's get going here. Alrighty, we're going to start with Manifest Destiny. There's not much that we can skip today, it looks like, because we are going to cover some of this today in class, but not a ton of it. Alrighty, so we will review today. Alright, number one, what's Manifest Destiny? When did it occur inside the United States? Manifest Destiny is this movement that occurs in the 1840s. The idea of Manifest Destiny is that the United States people have been, I guess you could say, endowed by God, alrighty, to expand, to take all of North America, to spread the American ideal, that it's, you know, American religion as well, Protestantism, alrighty, that we are divinely blessed, I guess you could say. We're on a special mission from God. It is our manifest, it is our destiny to expand westward from sea to shining sea. Alright, it's developed by a newspaper writer. His name was John O'Sullivan. Alright, he's the first to actually come up with the term. Alright. Again, it really kind of begins in the late 1830s, but we associate Manifest Destiny with the decade of the 1840s. Alrighty. Interesting about Manifest Destiny, the slavery issue dies down temporarily while it's going on because everybody's caught up in this expansion. As soon as Manifest Destiny is over again, let's remember, they're going to go right back to fighting over this sectionalism slavery issue. Alright? Any questions? Okay. Describe the circumstances that led to the annexation of Texas in early 1845. Let's remember, in 1836, Texas declared its independence, right? They wanted to be annexed by the United States then. President Jackson said no. All right, remember, he didn't want to reignite the slavery issue during his presidency. What ended up happening, if you remember, is almost a decade later, in the election of 1844, James Polk promised, if I win the election, I will annex Texas. All right, the American people voted for him. He won the election. And so as a result, the current president at the time, John Tyler, went ahead and annexed it himself. All righty, based on the results of the election. All right, he went ahead and annexed it himself because, of course, he believed the American people had spoken. All righty, kind of maybe wanted a little bit of the credit for himself. Okay. Again, so the election of 1844, which was all about Texas, alrighty, is really the reason why Tyler decides to annex it in early 1845, despite the fact that he didn't actually run in that election. Alrighty, questions? Alright, very good. 3, what were the goals of President James Polk during the campaign of 1844? This is a memory device, a Sage Note memory device, alright, coil, alrighty. He had a 4-part plan, if you remember, that he wanted to achieve. The first was California. He wanted to acquire California. Alrighty. Secondly, the O is for Oregon. He wanted to acquire all of Oregon. Remember, no compromise, right? He wants all of it, all the way up to the 54th parallel, which goes all the way up to Alaska. Alrighty. He wanted to bring back the independent treasury system. That's the I in COIL. Alrighty. Remember, he's a Democrat. Democrats really hated the bank, right? Going back to Jacksonian democracy, right? And so they wanted to take money out of banks. Remember, they blamed the banks for the Panic of 1837. They want to put them into the Treasury instead, so the Treasury will hold our money. Alrighty, he does do that. He brings it back. Alrighty, after it had been repealed previously under Tyler. And then the L is a lower tariff. All right, they wanted to lower the tariff. That shouldn't surprise us either. We know Democrats, right? Generally Southerners, they hated that tariff. He achieves that as well. It's called the Walker Tariff. They pass it in 1845. It reduces the tariff rate by about 10%. So again, COIL, California, Oregon, independent treasury, lower tariff. Remember, he's going to achieve all of these in his first term. It's one of the reasons that he decides not to run again for a second term. Also, he was very ill at the time. Alrighty. Any questions? All right, let's go to 4. Why did the United States have such strong claims to the Oregon Territory in the 1800s? A few different reasons here, all right? One, because of Lewis and Clark, all right? Lewis and Clark, remember, had explored. They had claimed some of that land for the United States. They had reached the Pacific. They had marched through there, all righty? So we had some kind of, I guess you could say, historic claims, all right, that went back 50 to 60 years, okay? On top of that, let's remember that John Jacob Astor set up that giant American fur company, American Fur Trading Company. That's what it was called, by the way, all right, American Fur. And it stretched all the way to the Pacific, right? It was the largest, he was the richest man. So we had a number of American fur traders in that area as well, which boosted our claims. Lastly, remember American settlers, because of Manifest Destiny, swarmed into the Oregon Territory. We had thousands, right? Britain had a few hundred. And so numbers-wise, we outnumbered them tremendously as well, which gave us, obviously, more claim to that land. All right? You should remember that, originally Russia and Spain had claims to these lands as well. The U.S. and Britain eventually get them to drop those claims until eventually it's just the U.S. and Britain that are left in Oregon. All right? Any questions? Okay, speaking of Oregon, let's go to number 5. What was Polk's position on Oregon during the 1844 election? The 54-40 or fight was his slogan during the campaign. We want all of the land or we'll go to war. All right, we will not compromise, we will not accept anything but the entire Oregon Territory stretching all the way up to Alaska. And then, of course, you know what he does. He goes back and he waffles. He goes back and he compromises anyways, all right, with Britain. Why did he do that? Why did he accept the boundary at the 49th parallel right in the middle? Well, again, that's because the war with Mexico was starting to heat up. He didn't want to fight a two-front war. He thought we needed to devote our energy, our resources to Mexico, and so he quickly agreed to the Oregon Treaty, and Congress went ahead and passed it. All right? To take advantage of Mexico, to not weaken ourselves, we go ahead and sign that Oregon Treaty. Questions? Yes? Lewis and Clark. Is that what you're saying about reasons why we boost our claims to the area?
What was Polk's position?
Oh, 54-40 or fight. All right, he wanted all of Oregon all the way up to the 54th parallel. Eventually, we compromised at the 49th parallel. That's the straight line that runs across our western border. All righty. Had we not compromised, the United States might have stretched. We would have taken all of the Canadian land all the way up to Alaska as well. All righty. So we would basically be connected to Alaska with the rest of our continental United States. All right. Let's go to number 6. Describe John Slidell's visit to Mexico City. Remember, Polk desperately wants California. His attitude is we'll try to buy it at first. If they refuse, we'll go to our next plan, our next step. All right, so they send Slidell down. Polk gives him basically the authority to purchase California from Mexico. If you recall, the Mexicans are angry. They're furious over the Texas annexation. Alrighty, and so they refuse to meet with Slidell. This is kind of considered an insult to Slidell and Polk because, again, it's really uncommon for a country to not least listen to the diplomats from a neighbor. Alrighty, but Mexico's angry. They're furious. No, get out of here. Slidell comes back. Polk and Slidell, again, are kind of outraged by this. Of course, we know what's going to happen next. Polk is going to go to Plan B, which is kind of almost force the Mexican army to fire the first shot in this conflict. Okay? Questions? Number 7, what was Polk's response to Mexico during the Slidell mission? He ordered General Zachary Taylor, right, to cross the Nueces River, alrighty, and to go all the way down to the Rio Grande. Again, from what I understand, it's about 90 miles, alrighty. Remember, the Mexican government believed the Nueces River was the actual boundary. The United States claimed it was the Rio Grande. So they basically marched onto this disputed land. They knew this would rile up the Mexican government and the Mexican army. And what they did was, well, they moved down to the very, very southern tip of Texas, right on the border of the Rio Grande, and then they set up a fort there, and they just waited, and they would harass and goad and provoke the Mexican army that was across the Rio Grande. Finally, after a couple of months of this, the Mexican army kind of took the bait. They finally had enough of it, alrighty, and so a few Mexicans crossed. The first shots were fired, alrighty. That was exactly, of course, what Polk was hoping to have happen all along. He and Taylor had kind of planned this, alrighty, and it kind of worked perfectly for him. Because remember, what's Polk going to do? He's going to go to Congress. He's going to say, we've been attacked, right, by the Mexican army. They crossed the Rio Grande. We did not provoke them. Of course, there's not like there's newspaper people down there to see what's really going on. And so Congress overwhelmingly is going to support the president. They're going to believe the president. Overwhelmingly, they vote for a declaration of war, not really knowing the reality or the real circumstances of this. Now, remember, there were a handful of Whigs already in Congress. Abraham Lincoln was one of them. Who demanded to know where was the first shot of the war fired. They passed a series of resolutions in Congress called spot resolutions, where they said where was the actual spot where the first shot was fired, because they weren't sure whether Polk was telling the truth or not. Ultimately, alrighty, despite the fact that there were some Whigs in Congress who at least questioned the president, almost every single one of them, almost every single member of Congress, including those spot resolution Whigs, ended up voting for the war anyways, because they were caught up in this manifest destiny. The American public overwhelmingly wanted to go to war, alrighty? They wanted that land, and so ultimately, even the congressmen that questioned ended up voting for the declaration, okay? Which groups expressed concerns? Again, some of those Whigs in Congress did. Honestly, our biggest group of anti-war advocates, the biggest protesters or critics of this war, if you remember, were the Transcendentalists, alrighty? Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Remember, this is the war that causes Henry David Thoreau to not pay his taxes in protest and get thrown in jail, alrighty? I should say Emerson, alrighty? Anyways, those are our biggest critics, all right? Kind of one of our artistic movements, one of our literary movements, because they kind of see what's really happening here, that the Americans are kind of drunk with expansion and are willing to take land no matter the circumstances. All right, questions? All right, very good. Briefly describe the outcome of the Mexican-American War. Well, let's remember first off that the Americans had a four-part plan already in place before the war started. The American Navy was already off the coast of California, ready to invade at the first moment that the declaration took place, all right? We had 3 different armies that were in position to invade or attack at the same time as well. So the U.S. was basically ready to go to war even before the war started, and we put our troops in place to do so, all right?